The Rules Committee will come to order, and it is great to see everybody, even though it looks like we're all on Hollywood Squares, but you all look great, and welcome back. The coronavirus pandemic has caused our economy to suffer the biggest decline since the Great Depression. Experts have told us that at least 1/3 of all pandemic-related layoffs could result in permanent job loss. As negotiations continue on a broad relief bill, and I hope we can get that accomplished soon, we need to use every tool in our toolbox to help our workers. That's why we're considering HR 8294 today, the National Apprenticeship Act, which will help create nearly 1 million new apprenticeship opportunities to train workers for in-demand jobs in fields like healthcare, cybersecurity, construction, and advanced manufacturing. This bill is not only good news for workers, it's good for all taxpayers, because every federal dollar invested in apprenticeships, in apprenticeship programs brings a $27 return on investment. This bill is a win-win, and I hope we can act quickly to make it a reality. But before we hear from our distinguished witnesses, let me now turn to our ranking member, Mr. Cole, for any remarks he wishes to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again. And today's hearing is on HR 8294, the National Apprentice Act of 2020. Apprenticeships remain a key tool in building and strengthening the workforce of tomorrow. For hundreds of thousands of American workers, an apprenticeship is a gateway to a sustainable, high-paying, and skilled career. Indeed, apprenticeships offer American workers economic opportunity and set them up for success without being tied to large amounts of student debt. While Republicans and Democrats agree on the need to reauthorize the National Apprenticeship Act, we unfortunately disagree on this package. Rather than modernizing the apprenticeship system and embracing employer-led innovation, Democrats have instead doubled down on the system as it is, not as it could be. During the markup in the Education and Labor Committee, Republicans offered a common-sense alternative in the form of a substitute amendment that would embrace employer-driven innovation and new models for apprenticeship programs. Rather than being locked in a one-size-fits-all program, Republicans sought to embrace new models that would grant employers flexibility using the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act framework. Unfortunately, the Republican substitute amendment was not adopted. However, I look forward to hearing from Ranking Member Fox on the innovative approach Republicans sought to include. I look forward to hearing why this proposal is better for American workers than the one before us today. Mr. Chairman, at the end of the day, Republicans and Democrats want the same thing, a robust apprenticeship program that supports educating American workers for new high-paying careers. Though we may object to this bill, at the end of the day, I think we agree on more than we disagree. This could be a real opportunity for us to produce a better bipartisan piece of legislation that reauthorizes this important program while modernizing it for the future. I think the committee would be best served to move in a bipartisan direction rather than advancing HR 8294 as written. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Well, the ranking member yields back his time. I want to thank him for his opening, and let me welcome our witnesses to provide testimony on HR 8294, the National Apprenticeship Act of 2020. Subcommittee Chairwoman Davis and Ranking Member Fox, we're delighted that you are here. Without objection, any written materials you submit to rules documents at mail.house.gov before the conclusion of this hearing will be entered into the record. Before I recognize the distinguished gentleman from California, Ms. Davis, let me just take this opportunity to thank her for her incredible service in the House of Representatives. I know that you've decided to go on to do other things, but I just want you to know how much, and I think I speak for Democrats and Republicans alike, how grateful I am for all of your incredible work here, and we're going to miss you. And in any event, it's I wish you weren't going, but thank you very much. And let me at this point yield to you for any opening remarks you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I want to just get back to hold a second here. Okay. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, Chairman McGovern and Ranking Member Cole, and I'm very pleased to tell you about the National Apprenticeship Act of 2020, HR 8294, a comprehensive reauthorization of the National Apprenticeship Act. I'll just say before going on with my remarks that I certainly do identify with the remarks of my good friend, the ranking member, because we all want to be able to grow and engage far more individuals in apprenticeship programs. We talk about, families at their dinner table, talking about the different options that the young people have, and we think this is a very important one, and it changes that conversation. I do want to say, though, that what we want to build this on is a proven program over a number of years. We go back to 1937, of course, and we have countries throughout the world that go back a few hundred years. And so, we want to be sure that we are modernizing it and they are flexible. And that's why we needed this basic program to build on. So I'm going to go on and just give you a little bit more information for those of you who haven't been as familiar with it, but certainly the ranking member is. Registered apprenticeships are our nation's most successfully funded workforce development initiative. And starting on their first day, the most amazing part of this is apprentices earn wages that grow as their skills develop, learn in-demand skills, and work toward a nationally recognized credential. And as a result, that registered apprenticeships open the door to paid on-the-job learning opportunities and career pathways for hundreds of thousands of workers each year. According to the Department of Labor, 94% of registered apprentices are employed upon completion, earning an average starting wage of more than $70,000 a year. It's a lot of money. But registered apprenticeships are not just good for workers. And in fact, they also help employers build pipelines of talented and dedicated workers. For every dollar invested in apprenticeships, employers receive roughly $1.50 in increased productivity, reduced waste, and greater innovation. So high-quality workforce development programs that work closely with employers and serve the best interest of workers, they're precisely what our country needs as we continue to endure the COVID-19 pandemic. Our economy, we know this, it still lacks more than 10 million jobs compared to before the crisis, and research indicates that more than 7 million of the jobs lost during this pandemic will not come back at all. During this historic economic downturn, the National Apprenticeship Act would create an additional 1 million apprenticeship opportunities beyond the expected growth of apprenticeships. And the legislation achieves this in 3 key ways, and these are really the goals. First, the legislation streamlines the standards for registered apprenticeships, youth apprenticeships, and pre-apprenticeships, programs that will make it easier for apprentices and their employers to participate in apprenticeship programs that guarantee critical quality standards and protections for workers across all programs, and also ensure that both workers and employers recognize apprenticeship credentials nationwide. They're portable. They can go anywhere. And second, the proposal permanently codifies the Office of Apprenticeship under the Department of Labor and state apprenticeships agencies, or the SAAs. The office and the SAAs will convene industry leaders, labor groups, educators, and other stakeholders, all the people that really care about this, to expand apprenticeships in emerging sectors, such as technology, financial services, and healthcare, programs that we haven't necessarily seen in apprenticeships. The legislation also seeks to diversify apprenticeship participants by directing the Department of Labor and states to expand apprenticeship opportunities for women, for people of color, individuals with disabilities, and individuals impacted by the criminal justice system. We can't get that anywhere else. We also have addressed a key concern of Representative Guthrie in this manager's amendment, which eases reporting requirements for smaller businesses by only requiring program sponsors with 5 or fewer apprentices to submit performance data annually. I'm glad we were able to come to that agreement. And finally, the proposed reauthorization invests in the national apprenticeship system by creating a dedicated funding stream to states. And the bill also establishes a grant program to expand apprenticeship opportunities and ensure that students can pursue high school or post-secondary education while participating in apprenticeships. This combined $3.5 billion investment over the next 5 years will deliver significant returns for workers and businesses, and it will also net roughly $10.6 billion for taxpayers through increased tax revenues and decreased spending on public assistance programs. That's a win-win for everyone. We could all agree now more than ever that we must strengthen our nation's workforce development. And to that end, the committee spent months holding bipartisan hearings, roundtables, and legislative negotiations. Several of us traveled to Switzerland in a bipartisan group to produce a proposal that focuses only on registered apprenticeship programs. That was our focus. That is the purpose here. But unfortunately, before the committee markup, the Department of Labor demanded that the bill give the Secretary of Labor the authority to carry out any form of apprenticeship programs, such as the industry recognized apprenticeship program, or what has been known now as IRAPs. The Department of Labor under President Trump has sought to pursue these untested IRAPs under the cover of innovation. And as I mentioned earlier, I too favor innovation, but I think we have to all agree that American tax dollars should only be spent on programs with a proven track record. And in fact, this is an argument I have long heard from my friends on the other side of the aisle during my many years of service on the Education and the Labor Committee. And furthermore, the national apprenticeship system is already, by its very nature, innovative. And we have codified innovative models like competency-based apprenticeship programs to do just that. And finally, I want to clear up what seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding around IRAPs. Private businesses are, of course, free to develop programs as they so choose. They simply will not be able to receive taxpayer dollars for their programs unless they meet certain clear standards around both performance and transparency. The very sorts of guardrails that we put around federal dollars in any other context. So while this seems to be an unreasonable demand, collapsed our otherwise successful bipartisan negotiations, and I want to thank the ranking chair of the Education Committee for that. We know that now is the time for Congress to invest in our best strategy for helping workers access education, develop those in-demand skills, and secure rewarding careers. And in closing, I just want to say that the passage of the National Apprenticeship Act of 2020 will ensure that all Americans can look to apprenticeships as one of the many high-quality pathways to higher education and, most importantly, economic success. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. I'm now happy to welcome Ranking Member Virginia Fox. We're delighted that you are here and we welcome your remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. and Ranking Member Cole, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on HR 8294, the National Apprenticeship Act of 2020. And I want to thank my colleague, Susan Davis, for her service to Congress and to the American people, and know that she's worked very, very hard on this piece of legislation. Just a few days ago, we wrapped up celebrations for National Apprenticeship Week, a week dedicated to showcasing the success apprenticeship programs have provided for workers and businesses across the country. Many who know me here in Congress know that I've advocated for these job-creating programs all of my career, but especially since I've been in Washington. Nothing can prepare a student quite like on-the-job experience, and apprenticeships are a tried and true method of preparing students to enter the workforce with the skills they need to succeed. While I know again that Representative Davis and several Republicans have been working hard on apprenticeship legislation, unfortunately, the potential for a strong bipartisan effort to improve the existing registered apprenticeship model while allowing for necessary innovation and flexibility to reach more workers has been eclipsed by the Democrats' typical partisan games. In HR 8294, Democrats double down on the problems with an 80-year-old system and want to close doors to opportunity by enshrining it as the only way to utilize apprenticeships to prepare workers for a successful career. As President Reagan said, the closest thing to immortality on earth is a federal government program. Employers know best what skills their employees require to excel in the workplace. That's why my Republican colleagues and I believe Congress should encourage employer-led innovation in the apprenticeship space. Unfortunately, committee Democrats fail to recognize the advantages of this concept as they seek to make registered apprenticeships the only possible model under the NAA. Even more, this bill will force job creators to deal with overly prescriptive requirements, additional bureaucracy, and time-consuming paperwork. It's no wonder this stifling environment has discouraged new and small businesses from participating in the registered apprenticeship system for years now. My Republican colleagues and I believe an all of the above approach is the best way to connect more workers with meaningful, well-paying careers. The Trump administration recognizes this as well and has taken important steps to expand and innovate work-based learning programs. More than 430 companies and organizations have signed the President's pledge to America's workers, committing to provide more than 16 million new education and on-the-job learning opportunities for American students and workers. Just last week, I spoke to the North Carolina plumbing, heating, and air conditioning folks in my district, and they brought up their commitment and the fact that their national leader had signed that commitment, and were very proud to report on how many apprenticeships they had created since doing that and how many more they expect to create as a result of it. They're very proud, and this program is working. Additionally, the Department of Labor is moving forward with industry-recognized apprenticeship programs to give employers more leeway to shape apprenticeship programs that will attract workers and prepare them for a 21st century workforce. We do not need Washington dictating how to do this at the local level. Apprenticeships will play a defining role in closing the skills gap and putting more Americans to work as we recover from the pandemic. But if we fail to create new and innovative apprenticeship models, this potential won't be realized fully. I urge my colleagues to adopt a more forward-thinking mindset about the apprenticeship model rather than setting in stone the 80-year-old model envisioned by this bill. And again, I want to join Chairman McGovern in thanking Representative Davis for her service particularly on the Education and Labor Committee. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fox. Dr. Fox, I now would like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Cole, for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman. But let me first begin by associating myself with your remarks with respect to our good friend Representative Davis and also Ms. Fox's remarks. I reflect, Susan, I had the opportunity to serve with you early in my career on the Armed Services Committee and on the Labor Age Committee, and on the Ed and Labor Committee. And you were always the most bipartisan ever and the most collegial and cooperative person to work with. So you will be missed. I very much agree with what my friend, the chairman, had to say about your departure. We wish you weren't going. You're genuinely one of the most popular members in Congress on both sides of the aisle, as well as one of the most respected. Let me turn now to the bill itself, and let me note, I want to begin by agreeing apprenticeships are a great tool. And when I was chairman of Labor H, we actually expanded the amount appropriated under both President Obama and President Trump, and think that's a good idea, a good way to go. And so we don't have big arguments here about the price tag that we're talking about at all. We do have the concern, and I want to ask Ms. Fox about it, that we don't think this has been a collegial, cooperative relationship. When Chairwoman Fox and I were here many years ago, now Ranking Member Fox, under the WIOA bill, it was very bipartisan. We worked across the aisle. We passed a bill 415-6 with a Democratic president, Republican Congress, and obviously Democrats in the Congress working very closely together on that. This seems to me the same kind of topic, or lends itself to that kind of potential, because, as you pointed out, Ranking Member Fox, in your testimony, this is something we support. We think this is necessary and a good tool to give a lot of Americans that choose not to go to college high-paying, sustainable jobs, and to increase the productivity of our own economy. So it's a good investment. Why do you think we didn't have that same sort of give and take here? Because there's a lot of room for compromise, it seems to me, in this area, and a lot of room for innovation. And as you said, not a one-size-fits-all model or a top-down approach. And I'm curious about your reflections, because I look at this right now as sort of a missed opportunity.
Well, I agree with you that it's a missed opportunity. And I think if you ask members in general if they support apprenticeships.
You might want to put your mic on, Ms. Fox.
I'm sorry, I wasn't. Sorry. There you go. I think if you ask members about apprenticeships, there is widespread support for them. And you'd have the same numbers that you had in WIOA. We worked hard on WIOA, and it was a compromise bill. And I think it has provided a lot of innovation out there, a tremendous amount of opportunity for accountability and to target spending, which this bill I don't think is going to do. So we all know that the apprenticeship model is a good one and has been for centuries. I mean, from the beginning of time, apprenticeships have been a way to educate people. But there are too many problems with the registered system, which has been operating for over 80 years. It still really doesn't change the registered system very much. But particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, the bureaucracy is just so great. It's not worth their effort to go into the registered apprenticeship program. I've been hearing that almost since the beginning of the time I came to Washington, that we need to change the way the system operates. And unfortunately, our friends on the other side of the aisle don't understand that. I'm not sure, again, why all the intransigence on this. I think sometimes perhaps it's because our colleagues haven't had much experience in the business world, and they really don't understand how it works out there in the private sector. And what's going to happen here is it's throwing money at a system that really isn't producing what our friends say it is producing. And it's not just enshrining the existing system and throwing money at it, but it's really precluding other systems from being used, such as IRAP, which we know are working right now in the country. And as I said, business and industry is signing up people, are signing up people into these programs. But every time we close out opportunities like that, then we're making it much more difficult for the private sector to be able to help people. It's as though we're stuck with this 80-year-old system, and we just don't want to make any changes. We don't want anything to compete with it. You know, I come from higher education, or what has been called higher education. I don't call it higher education anymore. I call it post-secondary education. But I come from that system, and I realize how many flaws there are there, and how little the system is doing in many ways to prepare people for meaningful careers. And it is absolutely true that people going through apprenticeships, particularly those run by business and industry, will come out of there doing much better than people who don't go through a program. So I support them in all of their iterations, and I wish that our colleagues would do the same thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Hey, thank you very much. And I'd like to turn to Ms. Torres. Okay, let me go to Mr. Perlmutter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, no, okay, good, there you go, okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity to discuss this really important issue today, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing us together. I will miss my colleagues, especially Ms. Davis from California. Thank you for all that you have done, not only for your constituents, our state of California, but for our military serving at home and abroad. Mr. Chairman, when I was first elected to Congress, I embarked on a manufacturing listening tour in my district, and I have continued to do that every August since then. One of the biggest challenges I heard from local employers was the need to provide basic skills training in advanced manufacturing. We were recovering from a terrible recession, but most of the workforce did not have the basic skills that they needed to work in the types of jobs that were readily available in our community. About 1 in 5 adults in my district have a bachelor's degree. Therefore, we have a great need to innovate and provide opportunities for local displaced workers to find a livable wage job. The bill that we have under consideration today, the National Apprenticeship Act, would help individuals like those in my district access these good paying jobs through apprenticeship programs. The bill reauthorizes and strengthens the 80-year-old National Apprenticeship Act and funds a program to support the creation and expansion of apprenticeship programs. This bill is a critical step at expanding access to good jobs in communities like mine. And I am glad to see that it recognizes that advanced manufacturing is a key sector for apprenticeship programs, as I have been advocating for this type of training program for several years. The advanced manufacturing industry is an economic lifeblood in my district, but only for those who can get basic skills training through a certification program. My bipartisan, bicameral Advanced Manufacturing Jobs in America Act would fund training and education programs to help job seekers build skills and land jobs in advanced manufacturing. This program would not only open up employment opportunities to many individuals, but also would meet the needs of our advanced manufacturing industry and help grow our local economy. I created that bill because I saw a solution born in the Inland Empire with the help of the federal government. Using a federal government grant, a local community college in my district, Chaffey College, teamed up with a large manufacturer in my district, California Steel Industries, to train thousands of residents in advanced manufacturing. A true public partnership utilizing federal dollars to purchase equipment. The steel mill provided the space, a facility, and the workers, and the community college trained those journeymen at the steel mill, and those workers turned and trained our displaced workers seeking employment. The program became so successful that many other businesses have joined in that partnership. Again, a true public-private partnership. Former Labor Secretary Acosta toured the facility with me. He was so impressed that he wanted to work with me, and he offered to take this model nationally. Unfortunately, he left before we could have an opportunity to move our bill forward. But the National Apprenticeship Act does that by creating 1 million more apprenticeships. In a time when the economy is struggling and individuals across my district have lost jobs and cannot find work, these apprenticeships create a pathway to good jobs, with many apprentices who complete the program earning an average of $70,000 a year. The coronavirus has devastated our economy. And as we begin to recover, we must give our constituents a fighting chance. And this bill supports access to good jobs and strengthens our economy. I urge my colleagues here to support the National Apprenticeship Act, and I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had one question for Ms. Davis. You probably get the same questions back home that I get, which is, now that you're leaving, can you tell us how we can start to bring people together now that you don't have to have skin in that partisan game? How should we be doing things differently? I'm struck by the comments of Mr. Cole and Ms. Fox about the commitment to get something big done together that will make a lasting impact, that will make positive, productive changes to the system. Sometimes in the lame duck session, we get those partnership things done, and sometimes in a lame duck session, we don't. As you look forward with your crystal ball, thinking about those concerns that Mr. Cole and Ms. Fox expressed about failing to find a way to come together to do something in a 410 to 5 kind of way. Do you see a possibility for that in the next Congress, or is your sense there in leadership on the committee that this is the all of the work that can be done, and it's this or nothing for these young people as we head into 2021?
Unmute, yeah.
Mr. Woodall, I appreciate your question. And obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. What I can tell you is that I think there actually were great efforts on the part of, certainly on the part of Dr. Fox, on the part of Mr. Guthrie and Mr. Smucker, the rankings of the higher ed from, 1 year to another. And we really did agree, I believe, on how foundational this needs to be for our country. The problem has been that we really haven't had the kind of support, the resources that assist and help businesses that perhaps are not as able to navigate all of this as others have. Most of the companies who came to speak to us, in fact, all of the companies really believed in the process that had been established where you have certification, you have registration, so that there is an understanding on the part of both the employers and the employee that they're going to get something in the end. And that's why they've been successful. This isn't about industry recognized apprenticeship programs, but it is about how we assure that the dollars for this are spent wisely and that they actually follow clear guidelines that the Department of Labor has set down. I can honestly tell you that we were about to, because this was about the registered apprenticeships, we were trying to make them better because we knew they'd been effective. And that's what people around the world basically told us as we learned about programs in other countries. But the problem was that there was a sense on the Department of Labor that somehow they had that they didn't want to have programs that they couldn't, that they sort of grew out of nothing, I guess I would say. And that was the concern. And they wanted to allow that to have this innovation supposedly, but they could use that through the apprenticeship program itself. And I think that's where we, have the disagreement that, in fact, we felt that it couldn't just be anybody who wanted to do it. They had to be able to have some guidelines that assured the apprentices that they would have a future. We have too many schools that have, erred in that.
Well, I find that very encouraging. The recognition that it is hard for companies that do want to participate, that do want to do the right thing, that do want to provide that value, that we might be able to do something to make that process easier. Knowing Congress has some changes going on, knowing the Department of Labor has some changes going on, if not here in 2020, perhaps in 2021. I always ask high school students the question, would you rather I lend you all the money you can possibly borrow so you can pursue absolutely any post-secondary education that you'd like to pursue, or would you like me to create some co-op programs and apprenticeship programs so you're going to have to work harder, you're going to have to go longer, but when you're done, you're going to have less debt and more skill, and an employer who knows what you can contribute. And I have seen over 20 years, those hands have moved almost universally from the lend me all the money I can possibly borrow and I'll take care of it later, to I'm going to invest in my skill set early, and I'm going to partner with employers early, and knowing the opportunity the committee has to make that easier on students, I'm grateful to you, and I'm grateful to Dr. Fox for the leadership there. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Perlmutter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I pass.
I think Dr. Burgess has stepped out, so we're going to go to Ms. Lesko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions, but I do want to give my appreciation to Congresswoman Davis for her years of service and wish you the best of wishes for your future endeavors. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Raskin.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to add my voice to the chorus of praise for Ms. Davis as she leaves us at this tough time in our history. We're going to miss you very much, Congresswoman Davis. Thank you for your great work on the National Apprenticeship Act. I'm very proud to support this act that will usher in 1 million new apprenticeships in our country. And we know that this is a central avenue for upward mobility and professional success for people. A majority of Americans still don't go to college. But apprenticeships are a pathway to continued learning and professional skills acquisition and success. And according to the Department of Labor, from the materials that you shared with us, Ms. Davis, 94% of the people who complete registered apprenticeships are employed within a year of completion, and they earn an average of $70,000 a year. So I think this is a critical social resource for us to be investing in, and I thank you for what you're doing. And if I could ask you one question, Ms. Davis, do you believe that apprenticeships are part of the solution to the profound economic dislocation that we've experienced since COVID-19?
Oops. Is that unmuted?
Now we got you.
Unmute, you have to unmute. You just muted yourself again. Okay. There we go.
Are you good?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
good now.
Great. I appreciate your question. And I honestly can't think of anything else, tools that we have today that can develop this better foundation for our country, where young people and people who are looking to start a different career, to do something different, we've always had workforce investment programs. But as a country, when you look at the percentages of people who are able to take part in opportunities like apprenticeship programs in our country, it is minuscule, absolutely minuscule. And that's wrong, especially for women, especially for people in underserved communities. So I think it's a valuable tool. And I love talking to all the companies, major companies in our country who use this, but they don't use it as much as they'd like, or they know that it's not utilized by even smaller, mid-sized businesses as much as it could be. And they think that this is going to make the difference in really trying to provide better tools, better understanding, better support for those companies and how they can engage communities better in this kind of work, which again puts money back in the hands of not just the people that are employed, but communities. And I don't think we can do that with a program that just isn't tried yet. So we're going to work with that. You'll see in the amendments that we have before you today that there are some good ideas there about how we can use some specialized grants in other areas. But the bulk of the programs is really what people have told us they need.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to Ms. Fox for her hard work, and I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you. Yeah, I too am very, very interested in this program as a path forward with respect to the economic disruption that we've seen right now. And as I think of it, I'm mindful of what happened to young people during the 2008-2009 recession. I mean, we saw so many young people whose plans were diverted from what they intended. They suddenly couldn't afford to go to college, or they couldn't afford grad school, or their lives got put on hold. Folks who were just starting careers had those careers abruptly ended. And then what we've seen over time is they've never made up that ground. And the kind of apprenticeships that we're talking about here seem like a path forward for folks who are being similarly affected now. Can you comment on that, Representative Davis?
Yes. What we have here is the ability to expand the kinds of programs that we've had here. We know the trades have done an amazing job, I think, within their scope. But when it comes to financial services, when it comes to healthcare, the healthcare industry really as a whole, when it comes to obviously pharmaceuticals, their AI, whatever it is, the way that many communities and our colleagues spoke in San Bernardino Chicago, for one, Denver, certainly in California, there are individuals that have taken partnerships with community colleges and really built these programs. And they're all built on the registered apprenticeship model. What we want to do is be sure that we learn from that and we expand it. And that possibility has just not been there. The other thing is bringing together all these multiple disciplines to be able to say, this is really what we need in our area. How do we make that happen? How do we use industrial parks? How do we use the schools? How do we use some of the buildings that have, are not being rented today in communities that are just totally underutilized, strip malls, whatever they may be? We can do that with this kind of assistance. And this does not give companies all that they need by any means. We're talking about seed money. We're talking about the ability to use that and then to move on and to gain that support from the community. And that's why these pieces that may seem like overreach to some, and I know my colleagues are concerned about that, and I appreciate that concern, but we don't want to throw the proverbial, baby out with the bathwater here. We want to be sure that we're building properly. And the worst thing in the world, I think, that could happen is for individuals to take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in an apprentice program that doesn't guarantee them those wages and that future. And if you look at the statistics, they're all there in this, as the registered apprenticeships have developed with state support. And there are state apprenticeship, the state plays a very big role in this. And that's why the language of the bill speaks to that as well. I think the pieces are here. And the reality is we need to grow with this. We just need to do a better job. And there is a lot of room for innovation, and we'll find more. I have confidence that, the Congress as well, but this is the Congress playing its role to make something better that we already have, but we need to far improve it.
We've certainly seen some innovative projects in my region, and as you mentioned, our community colleges are playing a huge role. Our local industries are looking for these opportunities to train the workforce. I had the opportunity to spend a day in the life as a sheet metal worker with their apprentice program. I have some work to do on my tin knocking skills, but just the benefits that are provided to folks in those programs and in the programs we've seen developing in my community are great. So I'm really excited to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, first of all, I want to add my thanks to Ms. Davis, not only for her work on this bill, but her extraordinary career and service to our country. And we're going to miss her very, very much. And I have the privilege, along with Ms. Shalala, of serving with her on the Education and Labor Committee, where she's been a huge leader and subcommittee chair. I also just want to say very briefly, prior to the pandemic, one of the things I tried to do is every week spend time at local businesses, small, large, and in between, and would always ask whoever the leadership team was, what's the thing that keeps you awake at night when you're considering challenges for your business? And without exception, you hear, I just need skilled workers. We just don't have enough people here. And maybe we could train them. So the technical piece, maybe we could work on that, but we need people. And what I really like about this, and I'm appreciative of Ms. Davis too, including a bill that I had introduced that would allow smaller and medium-sized businesses access to apprenticeship programs as well, because many times they don't have the resources in the past to be able to do this. So I think this is critical, particularly given where we are economically in this country and the challenges that we're going to face and the changes in the workforce. And we see changes in procedure, changes in productivity, changes in tools, changes in the kinds of way we process and make products. So I think this is a great bill. I'm really anxious to see it passed on the floor, and want to thank Ms. Davis again for her leadership.
Can I get the gentleman to yield for 1 second? Mr. Morelli?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. And I meant to say this earlier, and you complimented Ms. Davis on her service to the committee and her service to Congress, and Mr. Cole did the same, as did others, and I have to agree with that. But in certain respects, I'm happy that she's leaving. And that is because she wins every contest on best administered office, the nicest person to work with, the most beloved by her particular staff. So, you know, in hopes that I, or maybe even you, Mr. Morelli, could win one of those contests, the fact that she's leaving gives us a better chance. So with that, I yield back.
I would just acknowledge that I think it's not likely Mr. Perlmutter, you or I will be in the running for any of those, but I appreciate the sentiment. I yield back as well, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Ms. Shalala.
Thank you very much. I would like to point out that my office won that award this year. I want to add my congratulations to Representative Davis, who's been an extraordinary leader in Congress. I am deeply committed to this bill. I have a cousin who actually is a master electrician, was just hired by a community college last year to do the pre-apprenticeship program in the community college. And he called me and said, how do I get these kids' attention? They're all over the place. I said, just tell them how much money you made last year. And it actually worked. It actually worked to get their attention. This bill will allow DOL to provide additional support to employers in non-traditional industry. I also hope this pandemic, along with this bill, will encourage more remote learning in apprenticeship programs, possibly opening the door for people who have difficulty scheduling classes, like those with childcare issues or transportation issues. In Florida, we have a manufacturing apprenticeship pilot program that replaces the traditional classroom element with online learning. And I also appreciate the fact that this bill attempts to expand the reach of people in apprenticeship programs to include more women and more people of color, people who have long been underrepresented in apprenticeship programs. Let me ask Ms. Davis one question. Do we currently invest enough in apprenticeship programs in this country? And where do we rank in comparison to other countries in federal support for workforce development initiatives?
Yes, we certainly do not invest. In fact, compared to, I could take Switzerland for an example. I think our investment is somewhere in the range of about, 5-10%. And that's really way off from where they are. And I think part of the problem is that we just haven't over the years taken a real look at what it will take to do this better. And we know how well collaborative partnerships work, and they need to work in the best interest of young people in this country. You know, it's also true, and I think this was one of the issues that we talked about in our sessions that we had in our briefings and in our roundtables, is that there's often been a stigma to whether a student went on to higher education, traditional higher education, or they went into the trades or some other areas. Plumbers, we all know we need plumbers very badly in our country, electricians, etc. But the reality is that I think it wasn't something that people aspired to in the same way that we can help them through this program. The whole idea is making it prestigious. And once we do that, then we know that people will be able to succeed and communities will do better. So I don't know that we need to compare ourselves to others as much as we need to say we want to do better because we know it's in the best interest of our national security, of course, as well as our economic security in communities.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, this is Virginia
Yes.
Fox.
Yes.
Could I add something to what Ms. Davis was saying there with
Sure.
your indulgence, Ms. Shalala?
Absolutely.
I really want to agree with what Ms. Davis has said about this idea of respecting the alternative that people have, and say that this is another area that I have worked on very closely and very, very strongly here. I think, and I'm going to give this lecture I've given to many, many people, and some people will have heard it many times, but I think it's worth saying again. I've resisted pointing it out during the conversation. But what Ms. Davis is saying is so important. But what's happened in other countries is that there has always been the respect for people who did not continue beyond secondary education into post-secondary education. And they even have a higher percentage of people than we do in our country because they have emphasized this area so much. And there's respect for those jobs. And we somehow or another have to change our language, I believe. Saying that you're going to make $70,000 a year is one thing, and it's very important since money is a driving force in our country, but also changing our language in terms of what we call these programs. You know, I told the plumbers I talked to last week, I don't think we should even use the word tradesman. I think we should say professionals. Anybody who has a skill is a professional in that area. And of course, my biggest bugaboo is the T word. And I think as long as we keep using that word to say this is what we're doing in apprenticeship programs, or this is what we do in something that's not called higher education, then we set up a two-tiered system in this country. And so I really want us to think about that. I'd be remiss if I let this hearing go without calling attention to that, because we want, again, we all respect plumbers, electricians, carpenters, whoever those people are. We respect them, but our language doesn't reflect that. And so I'd like to encourage people to think about that, is that when you use the T word, you're not talking about education. And that's what we're about, is education here in every sense of the word. So I would urge people to think about it every time you say that. The only thing I remember from my doctoral program is that you train animals and you educate people. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for letting me get that in before this hearing was over.
Thank you, Representative Fox. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm a graduate of a public technical high school, and all of my 95% of my high school colleagues went on to apprenticeship programs, and I have deep respect for these programs. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to supporting this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Matsui.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I come in last a lot of times. You kind of listen to everybody else. And I have to agree with much as what has been said with Ms. Fox and Shalala. And also, I just want to say something about Susan Davis. I've known Susan for such a long time, a fellow Californian, but she has been so exemplary in her focus with students, with education, jobs, looking at the future, and also in the military. And what I have to say about Susan, her passion really rises above it all, and she keeps pushing. And her sense of commitment to people in developing their skills, particularly when apprenticeship programs are so important. And what caught my ear was, Susan, when you talked about sort of the prestige aspect of this, and I think Ms. Fox is saying the same thing. That is so important, especially has been demonstrated during this pandemic, what essential workers are. Who do we need around us? And quite frankly, I depend on some of these essential workers, and we all do too all the time. And I really feel that this is an opportunity here that we can really come together, because quite frankly, we need people with skills, and we need them now especially, and we need them quickly. And I really believe that the apprenticeship programs are the way to go. And, you know, all of us here are probably college graduates, but you know what? You don't need a college degree for a lot of these really great high-paying jobs, but they need to be trained. And that's really what's so important about what we're discussing today in this bill. And so I just thank you very much, Susan. I'm really going to miss you personally. I remember when I first got here, you're one of the first ones I talked to. And it's been great having you. And I know that we'll still have you in California, but thank you so much for your leadership. And I mean, all the time when we're talking about education and jobs and employment, and you stepped up with the military too, particularly with their particular challenges. I thank you so much, and we're going to miss you. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Does any other member of the committee wish to ask a question?
Mr. Chairman, not a question, but if I may, I'd like to submit for the record, ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a statement of administration policy on the legislation.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else have any questions of this panel? If not, I thank you both, Chairwoman Davis and Ranking Member Fox. Thank you for being here today, and you can now go. We're done. Thank you. Without objection, I would like to submit for the record 2 statements from Mr. Sablan, one in support of the bill and one in support of the Titus Amendment. Without objection, I would now like to welcome our next panel, the Honorable Dina Titus of Nevada. Thank you for providing testimony today. Any written materials you submit to rules.documents@mail.house.gov before the conclusion of this hearing will, without objection, be entered into the record. I now would like to recognize the gentlewoman from Nevada, Ms. Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cole, members of the committee, and Susan Davis. Susan has been a dear friend, an inspiring mentor, and a fun traveling companion during the time I've known her here, and she certainly will be missed. All of your words about her were more eloquent than I can express. I'm proud to co-sponsor this simple amendment. It's co-sponsored by a bipartisan group of members of the Travel and Tourism Caucus, which I co-chair, and it would very simply add hospitality and tourism to the list of non-traditional apprenticeship industries that are eligible under the bill's Modernizing the Apprenticeship System for the 21st Century Grants Program. I'm sure you all know that Nevada and Las Vegas especially have been hit very hard during this pandemic. Right now, we have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country because so many people here are in service jobs that are associated with the casinos, the hotels, the restaurants, and all the ancillary businesses, which have been shut down totally or partially, trying to help us get over the spread of the virus and move past this pandemic. Due to Southern Nevada's reliance on travel and tourism, economists have estimated it will take us 2 years to come back to where we were before the pandemic. But it's not just about the Las Vegas Strip. So many of our districts have places that rely on hospitality and tourism, or at least they create a large part of the economy and development and growth in those areas. The travel and tourism sector has an enormous impact on our nation's workforce. 1 out of every 10 workers, or nearly 16 million people, were employed in this sector in 2019. So this amendment, by including that sector as one of the areas where we could develop these apprenticeships under the program, would be an important investment in our workers and businesses in this industry. And that would be true now as well as once the virus is over. It'll help hardworking people by creating a new program in the hospitality and tourism industry that's vital to so many communities. I would note that this amendment is supported not only by members of Congress from across the country and insular areas, but also by a number of associations representing both workers and employers. And I would ask unanimous consent to include an article from Lodging Magazine, which is the publication of the American Hotel and Lodging Association.
Without objection.
Titled Apprenticeship Skyrockets Hotel Manager's Career, Even Through Pandemic, by Christine Killian.
Without objection.
Well, thank you so much, and answer any questions. And I would just urge support of this bipartisan amendment. I yield back.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I will now yield to Mr. Cole for any questions or comments he may have.
No, just quickly, very much support the amendment and hope that it's included. And I just want to add for the record, whenever my good friend from Las Vegas says another member is a great traveling companion, I know that's a trip I wanted to be on. So anyway, yeah, always good to see my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Torres.
Questions?
Thank you. Mr. Woodall,
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Perlmutter.
How does one join the Traveling and Tourism Caucus?
We'd be pleased to have you as a member, Mr. Perlmutter.
Thank you. I yield back.
Ms. Lesko.
I have no questions, but it is great to see everyone.
Mr. Raskin.
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thanks to Ms. Titus.
Ms. Scanlon. Nope. Okay. Mr. Morelli. Okay. Ms. Shalala.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly support this amendment. My district has a lot of, well, it's actually totally dependent on tourism and travel industry. So it's very important for us.
Thank you. Ms. Matsui.
Questions?
Does any other member of the committee wish to ask a question? Hearing and seeing none, I would like to thank Ms. Titus for your testimony, and you are now excused.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other members who wish to testify in HR 8294? Seeing none, this closes the hearing on HR 8294. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion from the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant HR 8294, the National Apprenticeship Act of 2020, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and Labor. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Education and Labor, now printed in the bill, modified by the amendment printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report, shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions of the bill as amended. Section 2 of the rule provides that the following debate, each further amendment printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report not earlier considered as part of amendments en bloc pursuant to Section 3 shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, may be withdrawn by the proponent at any time before the question is put thereon, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. Section 3 of the rule provides that at any time after debate, the chair of the Committee on Education and Labor or his designee may offer amendments en bloc consisting of further amendments printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 20 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and Labor or their designees, shall not be subject to amendment and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report and amendments en bloc described in Section 3. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. And finally, the rule amends House Resolution 967 as amended by House Resolution 1107, first in Section 4 by striking November 20, 2020 and inserting the remainder of the 116th Congress. And second in Sections 11 and 12 by striking legislative day of November 20, 2020 and inserting remainder of the 116th Congress.
Thank you very much. You've heard the motion from the gentleman from New York. Is there any amendment or discussion? Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by thanking you for making our substitute in order. That's a very generous gesture, and probably should stop there. But of course, you always want to push it when you get lucky. So I'd remind my good friend that there's only 12 legislative days left. We still haven't done an open rule yet in this Congress. This is a great opportunity. I actually do believe this is a bill that can and will draw significant bipartisan support. And I think there's some good ideas. Other members ought to be allowed to participate. But again, I don't want to push for that without also acknowledging your generosity in making our substitute in order, and I appreciate that very much. But I would ask for an open rule on this legislation, Mr. Chairman.
I want to thank the gentleman for his comments. I should also state for the record that it was our intention to make French Hill's amendment in order as well, but then he withdrew it. So, but in any event, you heard the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma. Any debate or discussion, questions or anything? If not, the vote is on the Cole amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, would like a roll call on that.
Okay, the roll call has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Hastings. Mrs. Torres.
Aye.
Mrs. Torres. Aye.
No.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. Let's start over again. Torres, no.
Mrs. Torres, no. Mr. Perlmutter.
No.
Mr. Perlmutter, no. Mr. Askin.
No.
Mr. Askin.
Mr. Raskin, you got to put your
The answer is no.
video on and then we can, there you go.
I'm trying to put it on and it keeps turning off. I vote no.
Mr. Askin, no. Ms. Scanlon.
No.
Ms. Scanlon, no. Mr. Morelli.
No.
Mr. Morelli, no. Ms. Shalala.
No.
Ms. Shalala, no. Ms. Matsui.
No.
Ms. Matsui, no. Mr. Cole.
Aye.
Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall.
Aye.
Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess. Mrs. Lesko.
Aye.
Mrs. Lesko, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk report the total.
3 yeas, 8 nays.
Amendment is not agreed to. Are there further amendments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Who's it? Is that Mr. Woodall? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I recognized your disappointment that you weren't able to make Mr. Hill's amendment in order, and I have an amendment to help with that by making Mr. Thompson's amendment in order. It's amendment number 22 to HR 8294 that provides the Secretary of Labor with authority to establish and administer additional programs of work-based learning. You know, we've gotten into a posture over these past years of feeling that perhaps some members of this Congress do not trust the administration to make the decisions they would like for them to make. There are those in this Congress who believe we're getting ready to have a major change at the Department of Labor with folks perhaps that they trust more this time around. And so I ask my colleagues if they would, particularly in this time where we all recognize that flexibility is required, if they would support allowing the House to have a voice on whether to be more nimble. Again, an 80-year program that we're trying to legislate on. If we could provide whoever the Secretary of Labor is in 2021 the opportunity to be nimble with respect to work-based learning and provide them with this flexibility.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments. I would just say to the gentleman that we've made an order, a Pappas Amendment number 17, which you know, also allows for demonstration projects, so it's similar. But in any event, I appreciate the gentleman's amendment. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the vote is on the Woodall Amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, could I get a roll call vote on denying the Biden administration the flexibility to serve American workers?
Yeah, I just want to get on the record. I want to become consistent, right? So we will. A roll call has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Hastings. Mrs. Torres.
No.
Mrs. Torres, no. Mr. Perlmutter.
No.
Mr. Perlmutter, no. Mr. Askin.
No.
Mr. Askin, no. Ms. Scanlon.
No.
Ms. Scanlon, no. Mr. Morelli.
No.
Mr. Morelli, no. Ms. Shalala.
No.
Ms. Shalala? No. Ms. Matsui? Ms. Matsui? No. Mr. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Cole? Aye. Mr. Woodall?
Aye.
Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Burgess? Mrs. Lesko?
Aye.
Mrs. Lesko? Aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman? No.
Clerk will report the total.
3 yeas, 8 nays.
Amendment is not agreed to. Further amendments or discussion? Hearing none, the vote is now on the motion of the gentleman from New York. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
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 In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes were longer.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify the record, I'd like to ask for the yeas and nays.
Okay, a roll call has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Hastings? Mrs. Torres?
Aye.
Torres? Aye. Mr. Perlmutter?
Aye.
Perlmutter? Mr. Askin?
Aye.
Mr. Askin? Aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Scanlon? Aye. Mr. Morelli?
Aye.
Mr. Morelli? Aye. Ms. Shalala?
Aye.
Ms. Shalala? Aye. Ms. Matsui? Ms. Matsui?
Aye.
Ms. Matsui? Aye. Mr. Cole?
No.
Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Woodall?
No.
Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Burgess? Mrs. Lesko?
No.
Mrs. Lesko? No. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman? Aye.
And clerk will report the total.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
The ayes have it, the motion is agreed to. Accordingly, Mr. Morelli will manage it for the majority.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Woodall will manage for the Republicans.
And Mr. Woodall will manage it for the Republicans. So that's it today. That completes our business. So thank you all. And without objection, the committee is adjourned. Yeah.